welcome back to Blender Sushi LiveNoding. In this episode, I want to share with you the specific use case of SphereChalk nodes in regards to grease pencil. So what you're looking at the moment is a bunch of grease pencil strokes in 3D space, right? But each stroke, as you can see, has created a plane that's kind of planar to the grease pencil. Okay, so this is actually interesting use case. I think if you want to make a tool in the future, you probably want to look at something like this. So yeah, when we are drawing with grease pencil, very likely we're gonna draw it on the 3D space, right? But usually wherever you doodle, you're gonna end up with a planar space where you are drawing the grease pencil. Regardless, I mean, unless you are using like VR tools where the points is exactly in 3D space, but in Blender, you will always have some kind of planar space. Even if you drawing, for example, if you're drawing on this cube, and if you set up the grease pencil to follow the cursor orientation, for example, if we shift right click, right, we can snap the 3D cursor and orient to that 3D surface. If we go back to the grease pencil and draw, and then we set the origin on the 3D cursor and then the orientations plane to the 3D cursor as well. Now you can see with this setup using SphereChalk anyway, we managed to create a plane out of grease pencil strokes. I found it kind of useful at some point, but I don't know the usage for now, but at least we managed to do that. And in SphereChalk nodes, so basically in order to do this, I'm using a plane node. This is special nodes in SphereChalk. As you can see, there's a lot of curve nodes and surface nodes. That's actually really specific to SphereChalk. But anyway, this plane can take 3 points and generate this square. You can also use point and normal. That's also interesting use case. Definitely you want to look at this. But for now, we just use like 3 points from grease pencil. And the way I do it is from this sampling of grease pencil, I get 3 points. This is kind of arbitrary point because we know that grease pencil strokes will have a bunch of points, and we just need to pick at least 3 points, maybe the first point, the last point, and the one in the middle. And based on that 3 points, we have like a triangle. And just based on that data, we can create this planar surface, and then we can simply evaluate the surface, and then now it's becoming a real mesh, sort of. So yeah, at the moment we are using viewer draw. I can bake it, or I can just use mesh viewer. Okay, now we have all this planar surface. We can scale. Oh, actually, we need to get the. We can scale. Okay, transform mesh. With transform mesh, we can scale. Scale based on the individual origin. I guess that's what I really want. Where is the individual center bounding box custom? Space direction, maybe 0 as well. I just want to scale this. Okay, scale, but we need to have the center of origin of the geometry. Oh well, maybe don't worry about that for now, but at least we have the origin, so don't worry about this. So we get planar surface from every object. Okay, wait. Okay, we have planar of every stroke. So now what we can do, if we want to draw all this grease pencil is on its own space, right? And we can shift right click and then select the grease pencil and then draw 3D cursor and then cursor orientations. Now that we have this 3D cursor there anyway, we can start continue drawing. So that's going to be on that plane. If I shift right, if I draw something, if I reset this drawing plane, okay. Okay, with grease pencil, okay, first of all, if we draw on different frames, we're gonna get a different stroke at different space and time, right? So it's gonna be slightly tricky, but anyhow, if we have something over there, and we did create the plane, right? And if we happen to draw another stroke and draw another stroke, you know, all in different space, if we ever want to come back now, we can just shift right click and then continue, you know, drawing. If I want to switch to this one, okay, it's much easier to get that orientations. I don't know, yeah, this definitely, this needs to be an add-on. I know I'm using sphere chalk to do this, but really what I want is to be able to go to any strokes orientations very quickly and then continue drawing on that space. Because I think it's really, grease pencil is really quite underrated, but I think it's really, really powerful in Blender. So this is one example. Another setup similar to that is actually using geometry nodes. Geometry nodes doesn't really regards grease pencil whatsoever, but grease pencil actually understand curve. And curve, we need to be able to draw curve, you know, like we can just draw curve on top of 3D surface, but in this case we want to draw a curve and then we want to get the orientation of the curve. Like, okay, in this case I have this three mesh that's actually generated from a curve that's being extruded based on the normal of the plane of the curve. Okay, if that sounds confusing, let me try to demonstrate something. Let's say I delete the curve there and I'm just gonna draw a curve over here. Suddenly we have this. Okay, this is interesting, right? From based on that plane where we draw the curve, we get this object. and then I can duplicate it, right click, convert to mesh, and back to this curve, delete the original curve, and then draw another curve on that plane. Suddenly we have that. So this is also something that could become a tool. The way I do it with geometry nodes, it's slightly confusing, but so basically we get our curve. This is a curve geometry, and I converted the curve into points, and then I converted into vertices and to get the domain size of the point count, and then I'm using this mesh circle. Okay, the mesh circle is important in this case. So we basically, from mesh circle, we want to transfer our curve strokes somewhat to modify this mesh circle. So the mesh circle will adapt into our points and simply draw a plane. And what I did was simply to extrude it and then do the mesh volume to mesh, and we are done. And I have this control over the offset. To reduce the confusion, let me bypass that for now. Delete all the mesh, right? We are back to this Bezier circle. Let me delete. Let me draw something. That's a circle. This is the extrusion based on that orientations and the circle. It's actually quite simple, but in this, I think I need to modify the setup so it can work with multiple strokes. At the moment, if I draw another strokes, what's gonna happen is that it's gonna glitch out because it's gonna use all. It's gonna get confused, right? It's only at the moment it only works with a single stroke. If I can make it with multiple strokes, then it's gonna be a tool. So a single strokes is drawing a shapes, right? And I can extrude it. We have this sample nearest and sample index. This is basically transfer attributes. I'm transferring the nearest points of the curve into the mesh circle. So the mesh circle will adapt into whatever curves that I draw. This mesh circle or n-gon will adapt to it and then create a shapes, so we can just extrude it. So that's really what's going on. And currently it only works on a single surface, but I found this to be able to do this, it's a lot faster to perform certain things. I know you can draw things based on the stroke, but in this case, we actually able to draw a stroke on this surface, and it's gonna extrude based on that plane. Okay, it's a simple, I know, but can be useful. Just someone's a little bit smarter need to be able to modify this and make a tool out of this. Okay, that's kind of pointing that way. If I draw it from this angle, maybe. Okay, duplicate this, convert to mesh. It's a little bit silly at the moment the way it works, but it's kind of working anyway. This, I can draw like that. It's gonna extrude that way. So duplicate, convert to mesh, back to the Bezier, delete everything. Right? I think this could be useful. I thought about these kind of things because there's an app called Feather 3D. Okay, this is a powerful app, enabling you kind of working like, with strokes like grease pencil, but you really, I show you this in the old video somewhere. You're able to use plane a little bit better than just the normal grease pencil, and it's really, it's almost like a deep 3D grease pencil or deep paint with grease pencil. Yeah, so you ideally you should be able to work with solid objects, draw strokes on the solid, draw grease pencil in the 3D space, and this tool, I don't know, maybe the users of grease pencil don't think much about this, but I think with Blender and grease pencil alone, you can perform some of this. Of course, you can just use Feather 3D app, which is like a web app that works with the iPad and Apple Pencil. I think it's also, see the way she draws the stroke, and then he or she draw the stroke, and then able to draw the surface based on the plane of the stroke, and then you continue drawing on the plane. It's very modern kind of ways of working with 3D, 3D space. Yeah, I don't know. I try to emulate that using Blender and grease pencil and Sverchok add-on. Anyway, right. So at the moment the tool is not finished yet, but the nearest tool, that's the closest tool to this method, is Sketch and Carve. Sketch and Carve tool for Blender. Yeah, this one kind of work almost like that. There's a learning curve as well, but it is also using grease pencil. A very smart tool, definitely. But the simplicity of Feather 3D is just amazing. With Feather 3D, of course, you can export the curve as strokes. It's no longer a curve; it's more like a mesh solid stroke. But also you can export the color, and I think I like this method of making 3D modeling like a concept, and I try to simulate that using grease pencil and stuff. But anyway, curve geometry works well with geometry nodes, while Sverchok regards grease pencil, but it's almost like a hack. But I still think this is also quite powerful. I don't know, in this case we are able to draw a stroke and get a planar out of it, right? So draw stroke, draw something, so we have planar of this. The next thing we want to do is to have a stroke, and then kind of able to extrude the stroke based on the normal of the plane, and then continue drawing on the plane, and so on. Okay, this goes crazy because currently we are using 3D cursor. 3D cursor is really powerful in this case. In order to get a plane, in order to get this grease pencil to just stick on that plane of reference, we don't get that with Feather 3D, I don't think. But Feather 3D have a lot of different ability, like if you draw a stroke, and the stroke will become like a 3D, where you can just doodle on that 3D objects, and you can also deform the 3D surface into a different shape, and then you can continue drawing on that. In Blender, of course, you're able to just draw any 3D surface, right? This is also really powerful in that regards. And yeah, from here, of course, we can just draw grease pencil on top of these 3D objects. That's also another method. Anyhow, yeah, I just want to show you that we are able to create planar based on 3 points. That's really the main points. And if you are using geometry nodes, you can perform almost similar to that mesh circle, where you actually set the position. You're sampling the position of the points and transfer it into the mesh circle, and you get that planar, and then you're able to extrude from that face area. Okay, so that's pretty much for this video. Hopefully this is useful. If it doesn't make sense, maybe at least this video can help you to go to sleep. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.